Everyone, good morning.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Just waiting
Nice.
for everybody to come on in. Um, okay. So I think we got everybody. So
Yep.
good morning. Happy Saturday. First Saturday of November. So you guys are in for a special treat today. We have Dr. Anthony Estreet, who is the CEO of the National Association of Social Workers. So please give your attention. If you can, have your cameras on, please. We want to make sure, as always, we're being respectful and we're attentive. um, Dr. Anthony E. Street is going to introduce you to our um, our speaker for today, Mr. Jabri Harris. So go ahead, Dr. E. Street, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Anthony Estreet. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Social Workers. I do want to say good morning to everybody, and I want to say a special shout out to our Clark Atlanta family who always continues to show love. Dr. Jones, who is one of my cohort members in the PhD program, and she's been doing an amazing job down at Clark Atlanta. I'm super excited that this grant is continuing to go, and she's able to continue to support students in their social work journey. I do want to take a little bit of opportunity to really talk about the importance of voting and making sure that we get out and do our part to vote. I know that speaking to this group is like singing to the choir. We are going to do what we need to do. You guys are in a very unique state that needs to get out and vote and definitely do their part. And that's why we have an amazing presentation from Mr. Jabri Harris today that is really going to talk about social work and politics, political action, and all the things that we're doing at the National Association, but really social work's role in engaging in politics, policy, and more importantly, hoping that we can inspire one of you young scholars to run for office one day so that we can continue to engage in this process, but also start to change the way that politics are done so that we understand more the person and environment framework. So Jabri is one of our directors of public policy and advocacy managers. He has been at NASW for about a year, and he has an extensive experience. He has extensive experience in this political and legislative process. I don't want to do his bio any misjustice, so he's going to talk about it, and he's not going to tell you everything, but he has a whole lot of experience with politics. So Jabri, take it away.
Hey, good morning, folks. Thank you, Dr. Street, for the welcome introduction. Ms. Campbell, Dr. Jones, thank you so much for the opportunity. And to all the folks who got up this morning to be on this call with us this morning. But before I always start these kind of presentations, I always want to warm us up for the topic what we're going to be talking about. This is all about building community. I'm sure most of you know each other. If you haven't, this is a great opportunity to meet a new friend that's going to be on campus. I call them battle buddies when it comes to campaigns, when it comes to elections, when it comes to voting. This stuff can be scary, it can be overwhelming. You may want to find someone that you can tap into, have authentic conversation. But I have a number of questions on the board here. While we just listen to a 3-minute video as we warm ourselves, get our minds ready, meditate on this, what we want to get from this space. Your name, your pronouns, where you from. That could be your hometown, where you live now. That's up to you. What's your voting plan? Do you plan to vote early? Have you already voted? Do you plan to vote on election day? Do you have your plan together? Just drop that in the chat. And then why are you here? What brings you to the table? Is it because you got extra credit for class? Is this something that really interests you? Just lament on that as you listen to this video as we get ready to go into the space today.
The Credentials Committee. My name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Heyman, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Roosevelt, Mississippi. Sunflower County, the home of Senator James O. Eastland and Senator Stennis. It was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen, highway patrolmen, and they only allowed 2 of us in to take the literacy test at the time. After we had taken this test and started back to Roosevelt, we was held up by the city police and the state highway patrolmen and carried back to Indianola, where the bus that day was driving along the wrong road. After we paid among them, we continued on to Louisville, and when the they came in Chillicothe for 18 years. I was sent there by my children, told me the plantation owner was only had gone down. After they told me my husband came and said the plantation owner was leaving came because of the time to register. Before we put out the plantation owner came and said, you know, it's what you said. And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I mean that. Said, if you don't go down and withdraw your registration, you will have to.
Well, folks, I think the sound's going out a little bit, but I'm going to share this presentation out with you folks so you can also take a look at that video. That was just a historic speech by Fannie Lou Hamer, one of my organizing icons, where she brought the DNC to their knees, really talking about her experience voting. I always play this video as we talk about this topic because the work and all the things and all the sacrifices just for us to execute our civic duty. Voting is just half the battle. Registering to vote is just part of it. Getting there to actually vote is part of the battle. But what do you do after you vote? What do you do after Election Day? How do you continue to make sure that your voice is being heard and making sure that we're holding our elected officials accountable? Today, we're going to be talking about politics, voting, and behavioral health. I know it's a wide array of us in this room today, more than social workers. If you are a candidate social worker, if you are a social worker, big ups to you. Of course, for NASW, we're here on behalf of the 750,000 social workers across the nation. And we'll talk a little bit more about NASW in a second. But we really wanted to come here today to talk about politics, voting, and behavioral health as a whole. So today we're going to go over welcomes and introductions. We're going to talk about civic engagement. Civic engagement matters for behavioral health specialists. The role of behavioral health specialists in advocacy, voter engagement, and behavioral health practice. Building civic power through collaborations, measuring our civic engagement outcomes, and then of course we're going to come to conclusions and open it up for questions for everyone across the board. So the National Association of Social Workers itself, we're comprised of 54 chapters nationwide. We also have a foundation, and then on top of that, we also have our political action committee. Our political action committee, we have a federal committee that monitors all federal elections, House, Senate, and presidential, and then state chapter PACs that involve themselves in statewide races, local races, county races, such as gubernatorial races, state house, state senate, those kind of offices. So when we start thinking about the civic engagement and the role of behavioral health specialists in this space, it's important that we talk about the role of civic engagement in our practices in general. When we think about civic engagement, it's vital for creating healthier and more resilient communities, directly affecting policies that shape behavioral health resources. So as a behavioral health specialist, we play key roles in empowering the individuals that we work with, their voters and advocates in general, educating on mental health policies like access, funding, health equity. As you folks know across the board, you're in school now, you know we're sitting in the middle of a mental health crisis that was just simply exacerbated during COVID-19. And what we see across the board, not only in rural areas, but urban areas, is just a lack of resources, a lack of qualified mental health professionals in those areas to meet the needs of that area. So what we do know, the lack of access is directly correlated to the lack of funding when we think about mental health. In this last administration, there's great strides made to make sure that we're tackling this issue, but there's more work to be done when it comes to health equity because of the wide array of inequities in each of our areas. And then also our role is reducing voting barriers for vulnerable groups and boosting community agency. What we do know is politics is the basically decides who has power and who gets what and when they get it and how much of it they get. If we're able to uh, build coalitions with our clients, provide them with the right information, we start to see some of these barriers for the vulnerable groups that we serve be less likely. As a specialist, your job is also to advocate for systematic change, and that's where the role of politics come in, ensuring that community needs and voices are heard, and that you as a person having the trust of community leaders, trust of sources of resources, knowing how to funnel those things. Your job is to make sure that you're using your voice to lift up the voices of folks that you serve. So when we foster civic involvement, behavioral health specialists help improve the overall mental health outcomes, but also improving their communities because of their advocacy for these critical resources in their communities. I'm gonna kick it over to you, Dr. Estreet.
No, thank you, Jabri. I think that's a nice start to our conversation. I think that, one of the things that people often say, and it's interesting, right? It was during the time when I was in my MSW program, which was like a couple of years ago. And then even now when when I talk to students, everybody talks about, oh, I want to be a therapist. I want to be a therapist. I want to be a therapist. But really understanding what is the role of a behavioral health specialist in advocacy, and really thinking about, how do you use your voice as a student, as a social worker, as a community organizer to really help people to understand the issues that are on the table, right? And so one of the ways that we do that is really through this process of bridging the gap between clients and policy. Right. And so when we think about the space of social work, people are like, oh, I'm a micro social worker or I'm a macro social worker. When the reality is you're a social worker and it covers the full spectrum, right? And so what does that mean? It means that one, as you're interacting with clients, community, and the individuals that we serve, you have to understand the policies that really shape the work that we're doing, that really impact the communities that we serve. And without understanding those policies, how are you actually, effectuating change within your clients and community? So let's think about it at a very micro level, individual level. For a client that is coming in and they wanted to access food stamps or benefits, right? If you don't understand the laws that govern that or how people can access those different actions, then you're not really helping that client. At the same time, you also have to understand that client's experience. And so what does that mean? It means that, if clients are talking about, oh, I've been on the housing list for Section 8 for 8 years and there's not been any movement, right? That is a policy issue. That is an issue around funding. That is an issue that we can effectuate change for, right? So it's a matter of taking, what we're hearing from policy and making sure that clients know what it is, but also listening to the voices of our clients and communities and ensuring that we are also carrying that message back up to those that make laws, right? And so one of the things that I oftentimes say is, when we're in this space of advocacy and working in social work, if we are working with individual clients without knowing the policies, then we're not doing a good job. At the same time, if we're making policies without knowing how they're going to impact the community, then we're not doing a good job. So social work has a very unique role in that space and really understanding the person in the environment and creating that bridge between clients and communities, right? And so, clients and policy. And so as you see on the screen, it really says behavioral health specialists provide a unique perspective on how policies impact mental health and well-being, advocating for legislative changes that directly benefit clients. And so how does that work? Right now, NASW is pushing for two key pieces of legislation that really focus on behavioral health. One is the Improving Access to Mental Health Care Act. Jabri can drop that in the chat. And the other one is our telehealth bill that really talks about, one, how do we make sure that clients can have easier access for mental health and behavioral health, and how do we ensure that social workers that are in that space are also able to receive additional funding or reimbursement for the services that they provide. The second of those key provisions is the Telehealth Act. Now, for those that are engaging in telehealth services, most of us are doing telehealth since COVID and really know that we can provide those services. But what people may not know is that every 6 months, according to the telehealth provisions, your client should be coming in to do a face-to-face session so that you can lay eyes on them. They basically recertify and all that good stuff. What the Telehealth Act does, it removes that provision. And so I'm in Baltimore, right? And so somebody coming into my office, probably it's 2 bus rides away, right? Probably not a big thing, but think about it from the perspective of somebody that's in a rural area, somebody that the closest therapist is 250 miles away. So that's 250 miles to that therapist and 250 miles back home for one session every 6 months. Now we take into the factor, if we're in a rural area, do we have the transportation to get there? Do we have the money to get there? And is that a feasible, good use of our time, right? And so when we think about all of this, it really does become a social work area of concern for those individuals that may live in rural areas, that may live in farm areas, that may not have access to reliable transportation. So if we cut them off because they can't make that one session, then how are they accessing mental health? Right. And so when we think about this from the standpoint of, again, the role of behavioral health specialists and how we actually engage in this process, it really is understanding what are the current laws at the federal level that can impact the services that we provide. But then we take it one step further down. How are we engaging with our local laws? One of the things that I oftentimes say is that the closer the election is to you, the more it's going to impact you, right? And so as we think about, the presidential election that's coming up, yes, we all have to vote. We have to do our civic duties, right? And that has some impact on us. But think about it from this. When you look at your own individual address, who's on your school board? Who's making laws for your counties? How are you getting access to better roads and infrastructure? Are they removing books that are part of DE&I? All those things happen at that local level that are closer to you. And so, oh, that changed. That was nice. Who's changing those? That was Jabri?
Yeah.
That is nice. And so, by the way, Jabri did this whole slide deck, y'all. Jabri is awesome. He does all the tech stuff. You should have heard our conversation before y'all came on. It was actually classic. We're not going to share it because we're not going to embarrass ourselves, but just know that it was pure comedy, okay? And so when we're thinking about, honestly, how do we see ourselves, it really does have to be in this bimodal kind of trajectory where we are talking to the community, but also talking to our legislators, right? And so sometimes I think Jabri and I, this is the question that we get the most is like, how do I get involved? Like, people don't know how to get involved. We talk about it a lot from a educational standpoint in terms of how social workers or behavioral specialists should do it, but we don't actually give that step-by-step guide. So today, part of this is really thinking about how are we going to do that step-by-step guide. And so some of this is community awareness through education. We do it through campaigns, letter writing campaigns, canvassing, door knocking, letting people know like there are important ballots on the issue. I mean, there's important issues on the ballot, but also, that we want some legislative action. Through community engagement and ensuring that we are talking to the community, we can also take some of these pieces of legislation and ensure that communities know how that it impacts them. And so what we do know is that, while people pass legislation that ideally should be for the greatest number of people, we also know that legislation also impacts people disproportionately. And it's important for communities to understand and know what this looks like, but also how can they create and engage in change. And so if our communities don't know who their councilman is, or who their congressperson is, or who their senator is, how are they going to engage in this process to create change within their communities? equally, as we're thinking about policy and legislation and really engaging in this behavioral health specialist space, we want to think about how do we promote health equity. And so everybody's heard about the social determinants of health and all of that. That is a huge part of how we see health and how we see mental health in this space. But we haven't done a good job of really defining what that looks like to promote health equity. And so when we think about equity from the national standpoint, it's really making sure that there are equal access to resources, equitable distribution of resources. Let me change that, because equal access means that everybody has access to it. Equitable distribution means that in those communities that need it the most, there's going to be more funds going there versus in those communities that need it the least, there's be least funding. So the funding is based on need of those communities, right? And so when we think about health equity, it really is, how do we ensure that the resources that each community needs is actually there and they're able to access that? So when we think about the role of the behavioral specialists in advocacy, it really does boil down to how do we engage people. And so I know people are like, oh, that sounds good, it sounds easy, but and Jabri, chime in when you want to. Engaging people, engaging the community is a lot harder than what people think, right? Because we are not a monolith. And we've seen it play out in this here election, right? Where people are saying, oh, Black men don't vote, Black women are unqualified, this, that, and the third. And what we're seeing is that people, especially when it comes to women, have to consistently show their credentials to validate their worth, right? And so when we think about that, how do we get down to that granular level to effectuate change? Because everybody sees issues differently. I will, and when we were doing some canvassing, I came across, and this literally just happened last week. I came across a social worker, nonetheless, who really, they were like, I gave them a Harris Walls button from social worker from NASW that was for social workers, right? And the lady looked at me in all seriousness and was like, "Who is Walls?" And I was like, "Hmm." I said, "This is interesting." I said, I wasn't sure like if we were being serious or whatever. So I said, "Oh, that's the candidate for vice president that's on Vice President Harris's ticket." And she was like, "Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't really care too much for either one of those candidates." And so I was like, huh. And so we hear about people that are undecided, but when you come in contact with one, you really have to decide what you want to do, right? And so I could have easily been like, this is crazy as I don't know what. Like, why are we even talking about this? Like, we know what it is and all that good stuff. But instead, I took the approach of, hey, well, tell me what you do know about the candidates, right? So I took a chance to hear what she said, to understand like where she's coming from. And then we provided additional information to help her understand where both candidates ended on the topics. At the end of that conversation, that social worker was much more informed, and she now has a voting plan to get there to make a vote. I don't know where she's going to vote at, or how she's going to vote when she gets there. But the job is really to educate people and make sure they have the information. Like, I'm never going to sway somebody for one thing or another, from one way or the other. One thing I've learned about people is that when people are hell bent on what they believe and how they believe it, the best you can do is provide information and give them time to reflect on that and to make an informed decision. And so we have to really understand what this looks like in terms of our role. So while I understand and I see that everybody has voted early and they have a voting plan, and that's super exciting and great, my question is, how many of your colleagues have you talked to? Jabri is going to talk about your sphere of influence. I forgot what he actually calls it, but he has Jabri, go ahead. Just tell him about it real quick.
Yeah, so when we think about it's the folks that we trust. Tapping into, and this leans into the social justice initiatives, and this leans into our roles as behavior health specialists. And as Dr. Estreet was talking about his canvassing experience, it kind of reminds me of a time in a previous role I served as civic engagement director for Detroit Action, where my job every day in the state of Michigan was building Black and brown political power, meaning bringing folks to the seats of power. If you're from a disenfranchised, marginalized community, our role was to bring you there and make sure that the political process saw who you were and you had a hand in that space. During the last presidential election, one of the coolest things and one of the greatest honors I've had in my life was building out a program for low propensity voters. When that low propensity voters, meaning folks who has lost faith in this election process, lost faith in policy in itself, don't see themselves built into laws, policies that's built for them. And through that space, just like Dr. Sri was detailing, we wanted to meet people where they were. Like my job wasn't to say to you, like, hey, black man, why you ain't voting? You don't care about your community. My job is to say, hey, what have we done to make sure that make you feel this way? Make you feel like you're not supposed to be in this space. Make you feel like when you vote, it doesn't matter. Our job is to reestablish trust. And that's what Dr. Street's talking about. Our sphere of influence is the folks that trust us most. Like for instance, think of COVID. During COVID, everybody had a friend that worked at the NIH, or somebody had top secret clearance, and that stuff was misinformation was flying like wildfire through social medias because it was coming from people that we trusted. If your mom called you and said, "Hey, I heard this about COVID," or your best friend called you and said, "I heard this," you're gonna believe that these folks really have your best interests at heart, and that's what it comes in the voting space. I spent some time at the DNC during one of our craziest times, and we would have our scales for margin of victory in terms of phone calls. We will make over 10 million phone calls, and if 100,000 people picked up, we had a great day. But as you know, that's not great margins. That sound like baseball numbers. You know, when you see have a 30% hitting average, you great, but you really on base 3 out of 10 times. So what we did, we developed something called relational organizing, meaning we're gonna use the people that you care about, you trust, to get into your spaces. Because if my mama called me, if I don't answer, she gonna call the cops. Like, where you at? So if she calls me and say, "Hey, X, Y, and Z is happening," I'm gonna listen to her, have a conversation, and then I'll make my decision from there. It's the same thing with your trusted people. So if you have people in your life who haven't voted yet, if you pick up the phone and encourage them to go vote, they're most likely going to do it. Just like our support for social justice initiatives and things of that nature. If we promote more healthier communities through civic engagement, which is really just vital for creating our healthier, more resilient communities, and directly affecting our policies and shaping our resources. If you're able to tap into the people that you care about to go continue to advocate in that space, is going to change the outcomes in our communities, just because of the people that we trust. So as we roll over into the next space, our voter engagement in behavioral practice, here's a few things I want to highlight here. Of course, empowering our clients, community outreach, removing barriers, and interprofessional collaboration. But what I mean by that, when we talk about empowering our clients, our role as behavioral specialists just really to foster our clients' sense of agency by educating them about voting rights and how that impacts their mental health services. As we know, like for instance, our the bill HR 1638. If you have not had a chance to take a look at that, please feel free to do so. It's Improving Access to Mental Health Act. This is a signature piece of legislation that NSW has been working on for the latter part of a decade, which does three things. One, it provides equity for social workers in the space, meaning clinical social workers who provide the most behavioral health care across the nation. We only are allowed to bill at 75%. So imagine doing 100% of your homework and the best grade you possibly could ever get is a C plus. Even if you did the best job you possibly can, even if it's better than your counterpart. So that's what we battle with here as a social worker. We provide the most behavioral health care. We're the most culturally competent and the most diverse behavioral health specialists in the space. Behavioral health providers, my apologies. And we're only allowed to bill at 75%. So there's a battle of equity there. And then there's two other provisions, which is our HBAI provisions, meaning our health behavioral health space, which means like if, for instance, if let's say grandma gets diabetes, she has to use a new instrument. As a social worker, you have the ability to teach her how to use this new instrument, but there's mental health provisions that happen or mental health things that could pop up during this space. Like I get anxiety around using this. I'm afraid to use this space. I'm afraid to tap into this space. You can't bill for that service, which makes it harder for skilled nursing home facilities to tap into using those services and finding adequate providers as well. So, and then also in this role space, community outreach, organizing informational sessions on voting and civic participation, tailored to the needs of your individuals and your clients. You know your community is better than we do. When I was at the DNC, our job was to one, rebuild trust, two, tap into a space to build a more diverse base of voters. Meaning that our job is to make sure that we know what was wrong, what's going on with you. We need to know your community because you're the expert in your community. No longer can we come in. For the longest time, when it came to politics, it came to elections, it was this ramp where 6 weeks before your election, we're going to come to you and pretty much tell you all the things you need to know. And we said that model just simply don't work, especially if you go into communities that you don't know and they don't trust you. That model just simply will never work. So we want to go into those communities earlier, hear real authentic stories, get to learn from everyday people. So your job as a practitioner in this space is to make sure that those sessions are happening, that these elected officials hear from those people directly, that their platforms, their policies match what your community needs. And if they don't, your job is to let people know this person really ain't for you. They may smile in your face, they may even look like you, but they're not for you. And it shows because this is what their policy says for you down the line. Because voting is just one part of it. Like I said, I always say voting is an act of faith, but faith without works is dead. And I know y'all know that. And the work that happens after voting is holding your elected official accountable. If your platform said this about behavioral health services, I'm going to invest X amount of $1 million into a new community mental health facility, and then you get 3 weeks before the next election, they ain't done that. It's your responsibility to remind the community that hasn't been done yet. And then when we think about removing barriers, we want to work to identify reducing obstacles to voting, like limited transportation, inaccessibility of voting information, and things of that nature. For instance, what we do, like with the new Supreme Court justice ruling, or Supreme Court ruling just this past week, allowing for the purging of voting rolls across the nation, and that's intentional because that targets areas like Philadelphia, where we know it's going to be massive turnout for one party than the other. That's going to be needed in those tight races, uh, like places like DeKalb County and Fulton County, where we already see traditional purging of voter rolls across the board. In Phoenix, Arizona, places where we know um, margins will most likely run up for the opposite party than the most folks on the court. Our job is to speak that the truth, call it what it is. Is voter suppression is going to impact communities that we care about, communities that look like you and I, communities of people who desperately need these resources. And it's oftentimes, I believe in a relative power theory, meaning if you don't have the time, the resources, you most likely won't get to be able to advocate for the things you care about. Advocacy is a luxury, folks. If you are able to be here this morning instead of working that double shift to put food on your table to hear about these resources, advocacy is a gift. And when we're in these educational settings, I'm from a big family, so I deeply believe in Sankofa. Our job is to take these skills and what we're learning here and share it amongst our communities. Rather than be interprofessional, rather than be with our clients, rather than be with our families or our loved ones. So also we want to make sure that we're using advocacy through data, using data on client needs and outcomes to advocate for policies, expand voter access and for marginalized groups. So we all hear this all the time. Ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. Meaning the work that we do in our sessions, if you're able to talk about the outcomes that your session you may have in a session and how the funding for that session has made better impact on this person's life, i.e. meaning better community work, better community work meaning better public safety meaning better engagement with the community in general. We want to use that data to make sure that we can make models across the country and inform our clients and inform the communities and elected officials across the board. But also using interprofessional collaboration, partnering with community organizations, healthcare providers, and legal services to support clients in exercising their voting rights. We want to make sure that folks know how important it is to make sure their voice is heard. When they divvy out funding, when they think about how do we tap into these provisions, how do we make sure that this gets paid for. They look at who showed up for me, what precincts come to vote. When we detail out where we going, where we do turnout at, how many votes we need for each area, how much money we're going to invest in each district, each voting precinct, each turnout for each constituency group, we look at across the board. We use the data and say, we know last election we had a 19% increase in youth voting. So we need to make sure that our funding matches that increase of people in that space. We know last election we were able to turn out X amount of percent of Black women in this district. We're going to make sure that we give this coalition director X amount of money to turn out more of those folks. If you're able to speak up and come into the spaces and say, hey, we know full-fledged what this means for our communities and what we need in our communities, they're going to invest in you because you show up. If you don't show up to the polls, they're not going to invest in those areas. If you don't show up with your engagement, they're not going to show up. What I do know is this: 10 people can turn a district on its head. 10 dedicated volunteers can turn a district on its head. If you're able to knock doors in a district 3 times over for an election, you're most likely going to persuade enough a percentage of those voters to either leave who they cared about, to not vote, or to vote for somebody else. And every elected official knows that. 9 times out of 10, if you're in a red area, the way that you make impact is making them spend more money than they wanted to. If, like for instance, we see this in Pennsylvania happening right now. Before Joe Biden dropped out, Donald Trump was polling on about 5 to 6% ahead of Joe Biden. Kamala Harris jumps into the race. Donald Trump was polling about 2 to 3%. Now it's dead even. Donald Trump was not expecting to spend the amount of millions of dollars that he has to spend on ad buys in rural Pennsylvania now to make up the margins. We think about Bucks County, Pennsylvania, or we can take it back down to Georgia. We know the voting centers is Fulton, DeKalb, and out there in Savannah. So we're able, if Donald Trump had to spend more money than he intended to in those counties and in those areas, it takes away spaces where he can compete in other spaces. If you go to a rural county and knock doors or make them go and take that margin down from a 60% Donald Trump to a 40 to a 49% or a 52%, those margins, those slim margins come into play across the board. And then last thing when it comes to like our voter engagement for our civic engagement space, it's we have to be the role models. We're the role models for this work. When we role model engaging in policy advocacy for themselves, model active civic participation for our clients. When we take the lead, when we take the mantle, is a quote we say around here all the time in SW: leaders lead. If you choose to lead, you're going to lead. You're just going to do it. And when you lead, people are going to follow. When you do the right thing, folks are going to fall in line for the work that you do. And then lastly, we want to educate on the policy impact, because folks, you don't feel it right away. And it's hard to see when you're working 2-3 jobs and someone's knocking on your door saying, hey, you got to get out and vote. I've had this conversation 1,000 times over. Look me dead in the eye and say, young man, I voted my whole life. I've been voting longer than you've been alive. I've been poor. I've been Black, and ain't nothing ever changed for me. And then you got to listen to him. You got to meet the client where they are. He ain't lying. He been sitting in this space his whole entire life. And every time his election come around, 6 weeks beforehand, someone smile on his face saying, "We here for you." I've been feeling the same way, but somehow resources never trickle down to the neighborhood. Chairman Harrison of the DNC talks about the old dirt road pack. When I got the opportunity during 2020. I served as a political director in South Carolina during the presidential, and you'll meet some of the most kind, well-to-do folk saying, "I'm just not going to vote." And for the same mantra of the old dirt road, you go knock on someone's door on a dirt road. This guy goes, "This was a dirt road under Clinton. This was a dirt road under Bush. This was a dirt road under Obama, and this was a dirt road under Trump. What the hell? What the hell is going to have to do with me? I'm still sitting here on this dirt road with lack of resources. I can't even access healthcare. What the hell does this have to do with me?" What it has to do with them is making sure that you bring them to power, and you talk about the things that the policy impact. Why them sitting out means so much more. If you're active, get your neighbor to come with you. Always have the Power 5 rule. If you made a plan to vote, I'm on challenge. If you already voted, I'm on challenge you to get 5 people to go do the same thing, because that means that's more resources, that's more people they have to account for in your district when they start building out their campaign plans. How much money I'm going to invest in this? What do we really need to start talking about? Think about at the beginning of a presidential campaign and at the end. Those policy plans generally change over the course of time when you start interacting with different communities and different people across the board.
I think the other thing too to keep in mind, and this really goes into that policy impact, right? Is one of the things that we hear right now, and this is complete and utter misinformation, is that former President Donald Trump gave me the stimmy, talking about the stimulus check, right? And so when we think about how politics goes in the process in Congress, we would be able to understand that where the money came from and under whose presidency that was the case. And so it's interesting, when I come across people and they talk about, because here's the thing, there are a lot of places that we could talk to people about. We could talk about criminal justice and all that. What people care about in terms of politics is the economy, maybe healthcare, but really it's how are we saving them more money to be able to live in this world that we have, right? So our groceries higher, our gas prices higher, like what is inflation right now? And when we think about it, right, what we're really talking about is resources. People want to have more access to resources. They want to have more, they want to see their dollar go further in their communities, right? And so we really have to kind of think about it and really, and this is what Jabri was talking about, is when we listen to people and hear about their concerns, we can construct an argument that is tailored for them. We can construct a rebuttal that's tailored for them, because we go in there with a canned speech about, oh, this candidate's going to do X, Y, and Z. That candidate didn't do X, Y, and Z. All they're going to hear is neither candidate is going to do anything for me because you're not listening to what I'm saying. But when we take that time to listen to people and really construct that response to them that speaks to their actual needs, we could actually think about, like, what are the things that have been done in their community to kind of improve that? Because even if even if in the example that Jabri gave, if somebody was talking about they lived on a dirt road all their life, that may be true, but that dirt road didn't get worse, right? So that dirt road doesn't have big craters in it and potholes that you can't really do. So it could have actually stayed the same, which is possibly good, or it could have improved a little bit. So we really have to think about it from the perspective of the person that we're talking to. And Jabri said it exactly right. When we're out here talking to people, we have to start where the client is, right? That's one of those really good social work perspectives. Start where the client is, and really the person and environment. We have to think about what is that person's environment, how has that person's environment shaped their views to where they are today. And so, when we think about Black men in incarceration, that has been a huge talking point in the Black community. And in fact, it's one of the things that they use, to really create an argument against Black men supporting Vice President Harris. It's like, oh, she locked up Black men when she was a district attorney, right? But when you actually drill down and do the research, you find that that is misinformation. And so while we're doing this talk today, and really, some of the concerns that we hear, we have to couch that into these two categories of misinformation and disinformation, and we have to be able to combat both of them because they had two different processes. So Jabri, go ahead.
Yeah, so folks, as we move into the space, I'm going to give us like a 2 to 3 minute break. I know we got a lot of content we just worked through. I do want to show this video because I know we're talking about elections and building capacity, what our role is as behavioral health specialists. But one of the roles that we have in this space is taking care of ourselves. I know elections bring a lot of anxiety, a lot of vicarious trauma that we tap into as well. Because if you're not only just thinking about your clients, but you think about your own personal well-being, as a person of color, as a Black person in this country, what the outcomes of these elections mean to you. I know there's a really interesting story that is going around Georgia about how folks are fighting for mental health and how mental health in this election is really impacting. So I want to show this video and then give us a few minutes to take in the information before we move on to the space around community organizing.
Of political stances people keep in mind when heading towards the polls, but Is mental health one of them? Yeah, it's something you may not think about, but Democrat, Republican, or somewhere in between, we've all dealt with mental health issues or loved someone who has dealt with them. A local group of advocates, they're encouraging voters to keep that in mind on election day and even during early voting. Atlanta News First reporter Sandra Bussey has the story.
When you think of mental health, do you think of policy?
Employment is a major factor in strengthening and supporting behavioral health.
When you think of mental health, do you think of the ballot box on election day?
From healthcare to the economy to criminal justice and more, mental health touches many of the issues that you might care about.
When you think of mental health, do you think change is necessary?
In an earlier survey this year of hundreds of thousands of Georgia's 6th through 12th grade students in public school, 12%, which is 1 in 8, report having seriously considered suicide 1 or more times in the past year.
Well, mental health advocates here in Georgia say you should start thinking about how the people you vote for could impact the mental health climate for everyone.
Advancing behavioral health care equity involves ensuring that all Georgians have a fair and just opportunity to lead healthy and fulfilling lives.
Mental health organizations from all over the state come together to form the Georgia Mental Health Policy Partnership. The group hit the Capitol today with a special message ahead of Election Day.
And what we're asking for now, our action item for you this year, is to vote for mental health.
They advocate for policies they feel best support people with mental health issues and their families, and feel they have already made progress through the passage of legislation like the Mental Health Parity Act. But there's much more work to be done.
Mental health is not a Democratic issue or Republican issue. It is a Georgian issue.
Sawyer Bussey, Atlanta News First.
Atlanta News First is your source.
So yeah, folks, just want to tap into that. If you haven't been able to make the pledge in your state to vote for mental health, go ahead, tap into that to vote for mental health. We're going to just take a few minutes here to gather the information. Please drop any questions that you may have for us. We did hear from you beforehand that you folks warm up midway through. So if you have any questions that we tapped into or we talked about that you may have for us, and we can take some time to answer some of those before we tap into the community organizing space. All right.
So, Mr. Harris, do you want questions now? You want them to take a break?
Yeah, drop questions and then we'll come back at 10:25 to start the community organizing space.
Okay, we usually give them at least 5 minutes, so we can give them 5 minutes.
All right, cool. We'll come back at 10:27 then.
Okay. All right, everybody, go take care of some self-care issues, and we'll see you back in about 5 minutes.
All right. And we're back.
We'll give them a few. We have to tell them 5 minutes to make sure they'll be back in 10.
All right, as folks start to trickle back on.
They're coming. And immediately some of them are at work, so some of them are multitasking, as you can probably tell.
Hey, I'm a social worker. We do what we do. So I just appreciate everyone being here, being attentive. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in. We're gonna start transitioning more to the side now around community organizing, and where that plays into our practices, and what our roles really in the community is. I meant to start off at the top of the call, and I usually start off most of our calls with a quote from Whitney M. Young, who is a proud alumni of Clark Atlanta, which he says it's better to have an opportunity to be prepared and not have an opportunity than have an opportunity and not be prepared. So essentially, coming into these spaces is really just preparing yourself for the inevitable. You are a trusted source in your community, whether you know it or not. Someone looks up to you, whether you know it or not. They appreciate the work that you do, whether they say thank you or not. And this is really just preparing yourself for what's to come down the line. Whether you're advocating for your clients or you're advocating for yourself, you're advocating for your profession. Um, you are a community organizer, whether you know it or not. Just giving yourself the skills to do so and to name it and put the words behind it is important. So when we talk about community organizing, it's two things. So us here at NSW, we want you to look at us as two things. We can be your political home and your organizing home. We're a unique organization where we tap into the needs of our profession, but also the needs of our clients. We advocate for the profession just as much as we advocate for our clients' well-being. Because if we don't have if we're not focused on the well-being of our clients, we can't possibly focus on our profession, essentially. So when we talk about community organizing, I'm going to read this verbatim. When we all engage in our communities and neighborhoods, uh, at at individual and local levels, we create a strong and vast network of grassroots activists and winning coalitions for Democrats, but for social workers, for behavioral health therapy practitioners across the board. That's what community organizing is: engaging in our communities and neighborhoods at individual and local levels. Meaning, I'm going to bring folks and meet them exactly where they are. Like I told you, one of the coolest programs I got to build out, and while I was working in this space, is building out a low propensity voter outreach, going to them, meeting them where they are, finding out the things that makes them say, I'm not a part of this process no more. I'm not seen, I'm not heard, I'm not listened to. When we're bringing the community together to talk about their needs, so we can build an action plan to go achieve them, because anyone can come in the community and start talking to them. This is one of my favorite movies. Is called Distinguished Gentleman by Eddie Murphy. I'm aging myself a little bit, but if you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch it. And it really talks about the thing that irks me the most when it comes to voting. Most folks vote for the name they know, because we don't have the luxury to go into we don't have the luxury to go do that deep research. Not everyone's a not everyone's a trained student. This is why I harp on Sankofa so much for Black scholars, but Black practitioners, and the most, because you're trusted. You instantly get that trusted space with your clients, with your families, with your communities. Just with those letters behind your name, people are going to listen to what you have to say, most likely. And folks vote for the name they know, not because they're stupid, not because they don't want to be better. They do it simply because that's all the time they have to commit to this. And when a politician knocks on your door and says, I'm going to do this and this, who am I to say you're going to lie to me? I have this rule: I trust you until you give me reason not to. And like, who am I for you to lie to me? And my job, our job, as these people who have the luxury of being able to advocate, the luxury of being able to have discernment in these spaces because of the places that we've been, is to make sure our community members don't just vote for the name they know, but vote for the name that actually cares about them. And that's where the community organizing comes in, engaging in all of our communities and neighborhoods, bringing those individuals and the local leaders together to make sure that we are building not just plans to vote, but action plans to deliver on our outcomes that we want to see. So that comes in, and doing the work of the community organizer comes in a few simple steps. And I call it doing the work. One is going to start with listening to people. Two, clarifying our common goals. Three, framing our strategies for action. And then four, helping build leaders. And then five, mobilizing the community. So when I talk about one, listening to people, that's meeting folks where we are. You've heard us say that it started to become a little buzzword among social workers, among mental health practitioners, is meeting people where they are. You can't possibly go into someone's house and start telling them to do some things different without understanding the ecosystem of that space, understanding the system that's created the outcomes that we see now. And then two, you can't come together to build a plan, or you can't even start to build trust without having common goals or a commonality to get somewhere together. And then three, when we start talking about the framing strategies for action, once again, that's that action plan. What is our timeline? What's those deliverables? What's the syllabus to make sure the policies that you care about actually gonna get through and make sure we get there by the end of the semester. What's that look like? And then helping build leaders. That's framing and giving volunteer leadership. If someone steps up and says, "I care about this enough, or I'm going to show up," I frame it in the space of what's going to make you leave your house when it rains. I'm from Michigan, so what's going to make you leave your house when it snow? And if you got snow up to your knees, is this something that's going to get you so riled up that you're going to show up regardless? So when we talk about building new leaders, investing in those folks who want to be here. How do we work ourselves out of a job? Like when I talk about Sankofa, that's giving that information so these people can advocate for themselves. Yes, our responsibility is to be the voice for the voiceless, but our responsibility is to make sure that there's no such thing as voiceless people, making sure that we give them their voices back. When we built out programs like those low propensity programs or the civic engagement programs, or just simply rebuilding trust across the nation, that was us giving people's their voice back, allowing them an avenue to say, "You did me wrong, and this is why I feel this way, and this is what I want you to do to fix it." You can't. My mom said this all the time. You can't owe somebody some money and tell them how to spend it. That's the way we think about trust. You can't mess someone over and then tell them they only got X amount of days to forgive you. That we in the real we got dabble in the real. That's a little gaslighting. So you gotta accept what you did to them and try to build that trust. And when you're building that trust, is building new leaders along the way, giving them the tools to do this for themselves, giving them the tools to speak on behalf of their own communities. And as social workers, we want to work ourselves out of jobs, quite frankly. You don't want to continue to, you become a part of the problem if you start to benefit on the wrongdoings in that community. Yeah, of course, be an advocate, vivify the issues, but create pathways so this doesn't happen again. And then five, mobilizing our communities. And this is the part I love the most. Once you get the few rallied folk who care enough to tap into the space and saying, "Hey, this ain't happening no more. We're gonna do something about it." When we start building leaders and mobilizing communities and allowing the community to speak for themselves, it hits a little bit different. Every time I go to a congressional office, I can give a great spill. I've been doing this for quite some time. I think I'm pretty good at it. But at the end of it, they say, "Well, Mr. Harris, thank you for that. And these are great facts. We understand where you're coming from. But can you tell me anybody in my district that cares about this? Can you show me those folks?" And what we come with is I say, "Hey, hello, my name is Jabri Harris. I'm here to advocate on behalf of the X amount of members in your district from NESW." When they know I speak with their authority of the people that live in their district and people who actually care about this, who votes for them, they perk up a little bit. So we need to mobilize our communities to the folks that they vote for. And the reason I have Obama here in this space is he's recognized as our first organizer in chief. He started his career off as an organizer, meaning that I want to know what's going on in the community so I can better the community. And really, this trend of what we see now was started as a snowflake model, meaning I'm the trusted source, and I'm going to find 3 or 4 people who trust me to get a message, and they're going to find 3 or 4 people. That's kind of reverted back into itself in terms of I'm the trusted source, and I'm going to give 3 to 4 people the information to go and find those folks and build more trust and build more community leaders, rather than they come back to me to get all these resources. I'm going to divvy out this information in the most relational sense, who I have strong relationships with, rather this be coworkers, colleagues, family, friends. Those folks, I'm going to be that trusted source so they can get information and flow it out to their trusted sources and be developed as leaders themselves.
Cynthia, my name is John Santori. I'm calling from the campaign, and I wanted to give you a call to see if you were interested in volunteering with us.
Ordinary citizens can have enormous influence in what happens in Washington. The problem is they're just not organized right now. And so those who are organized, the corporations, the special interests, the big lobbies, they have a disproportionate influence. And part of what hopefully this campaign is about is to tilt the scales a little bit more in favor of ordinary people.
The challenge we have in front of us is 5.5 weeks to do what in South Carolina took us 10 months. So there's a lot of work ahead, but it starts with us building relationships, sharing our stories, and finding leaders in the community. Ashley, would you mind telling your story? Standing up and telling your story.
My mom got sick when I was 9, and had cancer. And at that point, she ended up losing her job, even though she worked her ass off. When she lost her job, she obviously lost her health care as well. So now my mom was left with cancer and 2 kids, and we didn't have the money to pay for it. So now we were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt because cancer is expensive, as you would guess. We had filed medical bankruptcy. So at that point, I kind of noticed at 9 years old, you can kind of tell, even though my mom really tried to hide it, that we were kind of sinking fast. I looked around and saw the one thing that ended up costing the most, and that's food. I convinced my mom that I really liked relish and mustard sandwiches because I felt like condiments are cheap and bread's cheap. So that's what I did for a little while until my mom got better. I went on to college and I was studying film production. And in 2004, I went out canvassing, and I was canvassing in the poorest area in my county. And this little kid ran after me. And he started telling me all this stuff about his family and how, he wanted Carrie to win because it was going to make a difference for him. And his mama was working 3 jobs, and he was taking care of his brother and sister after school every day as a 9-year-old. Think about this kid, he's back home. That was his hope. And so the next day I went to school and changed my major to political science because I realized, it wasn't just me as a 9-year-old trying to help my mom. It was another kid trying to help his mom, and there's millions of children around doing the same thing. So I guess that's kind of my story and why I'm here today.
So when we tell our stories, it tells people who we are and why we're here. To build the relationships, to develop the leaders, to create the teams that can sustain this movement beyond Inauguration Day. That's why we're here in Pennsylvania. We have this great opportunity to build a grassroots network.
A lot of people don't know what a community organizer is. And in fact, I didn't know what a community organizer was entirely when I became one. I had been inspired by the civil rights movement and the idea of people working at a grassroots level to bring about change, to get people involved in shaping their own destiny. It's something that I carry with me when I think about politics today, obviously at a different level and in a different place, but the same principles still apply. If you've got a lot of people organized to vote, if you've got people who are raising money in small increments, $25, $50, you can actually match the power of corporations and lobbies to actually influence what's going on in a place like Washington.
But yes, I knew what community organizing was, but I didn't realize how powerful it could be. I didn't realize that was like the fundamental building block of a movement, was a community organizer.
So folks, we talk about, like we said before, there's certain aspects when we just think about doing the work in our communities, and that starts with listening to people. By listening to folks, talking in person, you gain fair understanding of what they want to do, what their situation is, what it looks like. And then you clarify those common goals across the board. As you saw in that video, folks sharing their stories and being able to build community that way, pathically talking about topics that really mean things to people across the board. When we build out teams during 2022, I don't know if you folks were active in that space, but across the board, we kept hearing there's going to be this thing called a red wave. You know, they didn't know who they didn't know who they was dealing with, but it wasn't a red wave. We were supposed to lose the House. We were supposed to lose the House by about 30, 40 seats across the board if it was up to everybody else reporting out. We were supposed to lose the Senate by about 5, 6 seats. We end up holding on to the Senate and losing the House by 2 seats, making the most narrow margin across that we've had in a very long time, which really impacted the way that we were able to legislate. We were able to see the American Rescue Plan. We were able to see the CHIPS and Science Act. We were able to see our first Black woman Supreme Court justice because of that advocacy and bringing folks across the board, folks who traditionally didn't engage in midterm elections, going after those folks and building trust and saying, hey, this is the common goal. We saw what happened last time. We saw what happened to President Obama when we didn't turn out for him. We saw what happened in 2016 when you thought we had it in the bag. And you're hearing it right now. We need you to show up. One thing that we did at the DNC, we built out organizing teams of 10 or more in every congressional district in the country. Meaning, rather you live in Jackson, Wyoming, or you live in New York City, there's a space you can be at little blue dot in a big red sea. So being able to find folks to actually make action plans and frame the work that we're doing in our communities tailor make it for your community to turn people out. And what we saw across the board, we were able to build out in those 6 weeks of time where they call it a persuasion period. And meaning that I'm just going to basically go pepper these folks with as much information they possibly can handle and hopefully turn out and feel informed. What we did, we said, we're going to give the trusted people in their communities all the access to the resources that they need, and they're going to organize their communities as they see fit, how they see fit, and whatever makes most sense to them. And being able to build leaders allowed us to mobilize communities and stop this thing called the red wave that we heard about, and see some first time in history ever achievements across the board. And so what does it mean to organize for community change? Community organizing, as we do know, is our fundamentally the grassroots process. But it's not about the experts telling you what to do. It's about understanding that community members are the experts themselves, giving them the leeway and the honor of their expertise. Think about this, when you're talking to someone in their own language, it makes them feel so much better. I know if you go I'm from Detroit, I go to the East Side and I say, "What up, Doe? Well, how you doing?" It's going to be a difference in like sticking my hand out and say hello, and they give me that weird look like, "What you doing in my neighborhood?" Every community, whether it's colloquial or not, has their own language. If I'm going to a Spanish-speaking community and I'm able to speak to them in Spanish without an interpreter, it's able for us to build relationship in a different way. So when we start organizing for community change, it's not so much about getting folks, we say excited, but we want to use their energy to actually spur that change, to start building out those plans, to start inspiring them to be the community leaders themselves. So that's this comes into our space, our ability to bring change. If we're able to show and demonstrate our ability to bring change into these spaces, that's being able to use our collective voices that many people working together to problem solve is stronger than a singular voice. I can guarantee you right now, if you go to Dr. Jones as a unit and 30, 40 students saying, "Hey, we want to see this," she's going to take notice to it more than you bringing one student saying, "Hey, I heard this across the board," but there's 30, 40 people working in a collective voice in unison. You're more likely to have more power. And then two, when we start organizing for community change, it's all about empowerment, giving folks their dignity and worth back. We here in the professional social work, we have one of our codes, our ethical codes, is to make sure that we're respecting the dignity and the worth of a person. if we're able to encourage them to have dignity in their space and encourage their worth in the information that they bring, and making sure that we recognize the value in that, and they recognize the value in that, it's going to make sure that gives them the leeway to be the leader that they need to be for their communities. And then when we start involving and improving their conditions, that means giving onus back to them. Our job is not to handhold or babysit anybody. Our job is to share resources so they can do these things for themselves. Eventually, if you're working with a client, you eventually want those tools that you're giving them, those tools that you're implementing, for them to do that ad nauseam without you. They shouldn't be coaxed along to doing that once you show them, in this situation, this is a tool you use to manage this emotion, or this is the tool that you use to manage this situation. You want to give folks the tools to use to manage their own civic engagement, to bring their own folks into this process. To what does it look like to bring grandma, grandpa into this process? Well, I know my grandfather was a sharecropper from Magnolia, Arkansas. He ain't never trusted a bank a day in his life. What does it mean to bring him to the fold of understanding this is what financial responsibility looks like in this space? And we have things in place that they can't just take your money no more, grandpa. What does it mean to bring folks into the fold and say, we're going to talk about stigma, and giving you the language, what that looks like in our community, to empower them to talk about the mental health needs in the Black community, to empower them to talk about the mental health crisis that oftentimes forget about us when it's our turn. I know growing up in school, we heard all these resources around suicide and suicide prevention as we were coming up, because during that time, the subgroup that was killing themselves more than anyone in the country were white boys between the ages of 13 and 25. Where now Black boys between the ages of 5 and 12 is the leading category of folks who kill themselves in their country and who commit suicide in our country. We don't see that same kind of advocacy. We're blessed enough here at NESW to be a part of the commission on the study of Black men's and boys' health, where we tackle that issue. But until we start vivifying things like that and making sure there's resources put into a place for a public health campaign on a national scale, we're going to see these numbers exacerbate. And then we talk about this increased self-sufficiency among community members. We talk about giving them resources and tools to talk about that to their local leaders, to talk about that to their elected officials, and how do we bring those folks to bring the resources to handle issues like that. We start thinking about things like maternal health across the board, Black maternal health across the board. We know in our country, the Black maternal health is at the same rates as we see in third world countries. And policy is all by design, folks. None of this is by chance. When you got a budget, when things are lined item out, that's a design. They know if they don't put a grocery store in this neighborhood, they know the social determinants of health of not having access to food. These folks are just as smart as everyone else. And I want to remind you folks this. One thing that we always forget in our rage and our fit of our fit of like self-righteousness sometimes is the other side is just as organized as we are. No, just like we coming together have this conversation about what we have to do for our communities. They come together and have these conversations about what they to do to destroy our communities. So we have to make sure that we stay organized and we lean into our communities themselves and give them the power and get not just giving them the power, but giving them the resources, the tools, and the support to speak up for themselves. So when we start organizing people to bring about the change that maintains high level of ownership in their own communities, they know they are in charge of their own destinies. When we start encouraging and empowering them to do that, you're going to see you see whole different levels of commitments to change because now they're not only they're invested in it, they can see the change that they're bringing up for themselves. Quite frankly, we want to respect everyone's self-determination and encourage them to have self-determination in these spaces. Because when they feel empowered and encouraged, that's when they start showing up to those city council meetings. That's when they start showing up to the polls. That's when they start showing up and say, Vice President Harris, you say you're going to invest $5 billion in this, and you sure enough didn't. Why is that the case? You came to my door and you promised me this, and you didn't live up to your promise. And then we want to make sure that we have increased social support. So bringing diverse groups together. So bringing up just like today, not everyone in this room is a social worker, but there's a home for you at NESW, and we love you just the same. but making sure that we create the increased social support. We're creating these networks of people that so we can encourage each other to be civically engaged, to participate in these spaces, to speak truth to power, to push people out when they start hiding a little bit, and to recognize the power that you have in your voice and the power that you have in your expertise. You are blessed enough to have the education that you have, and your job is to go back and bless the communities that you work with and bring those folks along. And then lastly, when we start doing all these things, the combinating forces, there's greater equity in society. And then like there's, as we know, there ain't no such people of color, we know this, Black folk, we know this. Ain't no such thing as being fair in this country. Our job is to make sure that we fight for equity. We fight for our equitable rights in these spaces. We fight for our human rights. We fight to be seen. When we gain control over the forces that shape their lives, we start to see there's greater equity. We don't get a Ketanji Brown Jackson on the court without finding without that being a campaign promise. While there being the largest swatch of voters on the Democratic Party saying, we want the court to look like us. We want the court to look like the people that put you here. You don't see a American Rescue Plan without you saying we want representation for us in these spaces. You don't see investment and you don't see an investment on the Commission of Black Men's and Boys' Health without folks are coming across the board and finding equity in those spaces and saying we demand that you do these things. You don't see it, like for instance right now we're fighting just to see there's going to be an end of the year package. I know there's a little bit of legislative minutia, but with the end of the year package basically meaning these are all the things that we've been working our butts off for the end of the year that we just simply can't find funding for. But because there's a lot of political theater happening right now, there's going to be a lot of communities who don't get the benefit of the hard work and all the policies that we know and all the research that we know that's been put in, because there's political theater and they don't want to give some folks some wins. So it's our responsibility to bring those folks to their knees and remind them this is what you came here to do. One of my favorite videos, one of my favorite things that during Obama's presidency and the first time around in 2010, a lot of folks, I don't know if folks know this, but a lot of folks lost their jobs because of their vote for ACA. And the call around the hill wasn't, we got to do this because it's the right thing to do. It's like you came here for a reason. Your community sent you here to make this vote. This is a once a lifetime thing. If you feel the backlash of the angry folks and the money that's going to get poured into your election because you made the right decision, you're not here for the right reasons in the first place. When you see folks across the board like our good friend Jamal Bowman and Corey Bush, who we work with across the board and we care about dearly here at NASW, when you see folks like that speaking truth to power, folks are going to come after you. So when you start fighting for greater equity in society and you start speaking truth to power, there's always, remember, like I said, there's always the other side who's just as organized as you are. They're going to make sure that those voices are trampled and those voices are silenced, and they're going to put someone in place who may not rock the boat as much. But never, like we say this all the time at NSW, leaders lead. If you want to be a leader, to much is given, much is required. Sometimes, listen, they talk about us, they call us everything but a child of God for sometimes. But the reality is leaders lead, you got to make tough decisions. But that sometimes looks like bringing folks in. And not everyone's invested in making sure that everyone's story is told. Not everyone's invested in making sure everyone finds equity in the spaces that we care about. So when we start thinking about effective ways of community organizing and strategies for community organizing, I want to give folks the opportunity. Like I said, folks, you're gonna have an opportunity to get this slideshow. So if you want, if you want to doodle, if you're just trying to tap into it or screenshot, we're gonna share this over to Ms. Campbell, and y'all gonna have this in your hands yourselves, so you can pick through it and all that jazz. And then what are effective strategies in community organizing? I always tell folks these are the 4 spaces. If you just don't know where to start in one of these, and you're going to be able to organize your community the way you need to. So organizing around local issues. 1, meaning what in my community do we care about? We care about public safety. I always have this conversation around public safety, especially when it comes to Black folk. We want safe communities just like anybody else. We just want, when I call the cops, I don't get my butt beat. We don't get killed or falsely accused for wanting to be safe. So organizing around those local issues, or what does that look like for more investment into community mental health? What does that look like for more investment into unhoused resources in our area? What does that look like for investment in social work safety in our areas? What does that look like for investments in child welfare in our areas? What is the responsibility of the local municipalities to bring equitable housing to our spaces, and how does that impact our mental health? Organizing around a number of issues, as you know, as the expert in your community, of what's really the deeper rooted issue. Asking that next question. I remember when I was a young whippersnapper myself, very headstrong. One of the elders pulled me aside and said, sometimes you can't get the answers you want because you don't know what questions to ask. And this is what organizing with local issues look like, bringing the local communities together so you can know what questions to ask. Because if you don't ask the right questions, you ain't never gonna get the right answers. And you're gonna start seeing this nasty, vicious cycle of the same thing happen over and over again. Because unfortunately, we are advocating and organizing around the same things that my grandmother was advocating and organizing around when she was selling Panther papers, quite frankly. And when you think about the right now, and so going into the second space, organizing for policy change, and we're going to talk about some organizations that really spurred movement. And one of the organizations that's always set near and dear to my heart is the Black Panther Party. And as you see across the board, and when they first came out, late '60s, that's a radical group of Black folk who want to burn down the country. But right now, those same policy ideals that was the basis of their 10-point plan is the baseline if you're a good Democratic governor. Vice President Tim Walz is highly touted, and one of the major reasons why he's vice presidential candidate right now was his ability to pass a free breakfast program in the state of Minnesota. And that socialist idea came from and don't quote me on that, but that idea that idea came from the Black Panther Party. That was a liberal hippie idea that no one thought we could ever do. That's one of the first things the Panther Party free food program, feeding children before they got to school, making sure they had activities to do to be safe, making sure they had food in their belly so they can learn. And that becomes a basis idea. That becomes a basis for democratic policy across the board. Affordable Care Act, originally an idea in the neighborhoods of Atlanta to make sure that Black folk could take care of themselves. It was a network of Black doctors that was modeled off of in Atlanta communities, which became a basis across the board in terms of you're not a good Democrat if you don't believe in some form of creating access to for better health care for folks across the board. Organizing around social change. We see movements like this, like the Black Lives Matter, Vote for Our March for Our Lives. We see movements like that organizing around social change, things that bring folks to their knees. Right now, there is a union strike happening in California for social workers and healthcare workers across the board, to fighting for more equity and more equitable pay for the work they do. Or we see across the board in margins, corporations making benefit more like they haven't seen before, increasing profit margins by 400%, and while wages are still stagnant and housing prices are exorbitant. And then organizing with coalitions. Like we're a collective here right now. We're not just social workers, we're behavioral health specialists. Once again, there's a home for you at NASW. But we want to organize in coalition. Dr. Estreet's a part of a really great group called the CEO Alliance. And right now, what folks don't know, and I love vivifying this every chance I get, but every major mental health organization is led by a black leader. And this changes outcomes across the board. Being able to speak to the need for diversity in our workforce, being able to speak to the woes of anti-Blackness in our workforce, and just the sheer amount of racism that you deal with as a Black leader, but also as a Black practitioner in this space. Being able to talk about just the cultural awareness that's needed to do the work in our communities, that changes when folks at the top start to look like the folks that they serve. And that's one of the great things. Doc, you want to talk a little bit about the CEO Alliance and some of the work that y'all do before we move into the next phase?
Yeah, so I think that's a great opportunity to talk about coalition building and really thinking about community organizing, right? So when you think about the CEO Alliance, I know it sounds, interesting, but it really is a group of CEOs that have decided to engage in community organizing, coalition building around this issue of mental health. And so just to kind of name, these are primarily the larger mental health organizations. So like the CEO from NAMI, both APAs, NASW, American Counseling Association, and a whole host of other national organizations that really come together to say, hey, there's this issue that we all care about, mental health. And so how can we come together as large entities, large organizations to, one, pull our resources together and then use those resources to effectuate change at that federal level. So how do we then use our collective power to really say to Congress that we want to see these changes? And so when you think about it, right, we also use the power of the association. And so, NASW with over 700,000 social workers, the American Counseling Association with over, I think, 300,000. And you think about it, like we're building community, we're building coalition so that we can say, hey, we have the voice of over X number of mental health providers that also agree with this work that we're trying to do, right? And so when you have that large level of coalition building and community organizing, people tend to listen, right? And so, we get responses back from congressmen, from senators, and all that really want to be a part of it. And then we can effectuate change in different ways. I'm not sure if you all are aware of this, but the group that I just named, NAMI, both APAs, ACA, NASW, they're all led by Black people right now. So if there was ever a time to really highlight the issues of mental health within the Black community, this would be it, right? And so the more that we're able to advocate for those things and do programming around it, right? We get a collective effort, but also we get a concentration where we can make sure that, one, we're highlighting the issues that are important to us, but at the same time, making sure that the community has a voice at Federal Hill and on the Capitol to create things like the Commission on Black Men and Boys, to create things like doing more mental health in the Black community, to create different funding opportunities at HRSA and SAMHSA that focus on the maternal health of Black women, and really how do we start engaging in things and issues that really impact the Black community. Again, and no other time in history has all of our organizations been led by Black people. And so, while we're here, we're going to make sure that we're elevating these issues that are impacting us. And really, one of the things that was a catalyst for that was, as you saw, I think it was last year, the rate of suicide among Black youth is now exceeding that of their white counterparts, right? Which has never happened before. And so what we're seeing is that more people are talking about mental health, but at the same time, we're not seeing that workforce development in terms of how do we bring more Black people into this mental health space so that people can and do feel much more comfortable about seeking out help, reaching out for help, and really having providers that are culturally sensitive and culturally attuned to what is happening in their communities, that can speak to how do we create opportunities for intervention and prevention in the Black community.
Yeah, thanks for that, Doc. Some of the great work that they've been able to do with the CEO Alliance is in terms of just bringing folks together and vivifying some of these issues that you just simply can't talk about it without the cultural touch points, having Black leadership in this space. And this is why this is a unique time, especially with the next 2 years being a heavy emphasis and focus on the care budget, to really bring resources for the communities that we really care about, the communities that we serve. A lot of the reason you ask yourself, what's your why? And that's one of the questions we had in our warm-up space, is asking, what's your why? What brings you to the table? Like, I understand, like, this you came here for resources, came here for information. But what brings you to the table? What compelled you enough this morning to say, I'm gonna get up at 9:30 on my Saturday to hear some of these resources? And when you talk about your why and what brings you here, That's your catalyst and your fuel to continue to organize the folks around you and to organize within your practice and to organize within your communities as well. So you ask yourself, how do you bring change through community organizing? It's coming down to three things. One, you got to be flexible. And I mean, we talk about this all day. It's becoming a buzzword, meeting people where they are. I live my life by being rigidly flexible, meaning things don't change at the drop of a dime. I played ball back in the day, and my coach always preached sudden change. Who are you when things change? When things change like that, how are you going to react? Remember, we talked about Whitney M. Young. You got to be, if you're prepared, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. So if you have an opportunity in your face and you're prepared to take that on, you got to be able to, you can tap into that when you're being rigidly flexible. So first things first is being flexible enough to meet people where they are. Two is being strategic. That's when we start talking about what points of what coalitions in the community, what constituencies in the community do I need to bring in to make sure that we have a well represented, a holistic, well-rounded voice about the change that we're seeking, or who we bring into this space. When we have a partnership with APA, or when we have a partnership, like for instance, we know right now in this Congress, it's going to be a very hard chance for us to get that provision in terms of the 75 to 85% increase across the board. It's going to be very tough if we go, speaking truth to power. But we do know we're strategic in this next Congress and working with a coalition of groups like the marriage and family therapists and licensed LPCs to tap into the space of who they're also sitting at 75%. If we can find a way to bring them along with us, but also finding a way to pay for it, in terms of looking at the budget and understanding that this is a tax code year, we can use positioning ourselves that this is a social justice issue for us to be taken care of, and maybe we can pay for this through tax code issues, or maybe we can pay for this directly by something that we're funding that we just don't need to fund anymore. But being strategic about our partnerships and our ask is the second space, and then three, it's always be people centered. I'm a social worker. I'm a BSW, a MSW, and I've only been called social worker in my internships. So when I talk about being people centered, when I decided I'm going to be working in the macro space and working in politics, because my journey in this space started off as a political organizer on Mayor Pete Buttigieg's campaign in New Hampshire, as in my official capacity before knocking doors and stuff like that, and organizing and working in the Congress space. But starting off there, of making sure I was told myself, and I was sitting there, I remember I went home and I was working in the state house as a LA back in Michigan, and I'm watching this debate with my mom, and I just recently moved back home after grad school, and I heard Mayor Pete give this really authentic answer of what he did wrong during his space of handling a police injustice. And I said to my mom, I said, I work in this space, but I cannot stand politicians. And I would never work for a politician, but I'm going to work for people who know people, and who's invested in people and people. And that's who Mayor Pete was, and someone who invested in people. And that's why I decided to go work for him and move into that space, and always staying people centered, making sure that our policies reflected the communities that we worked with. When we built out a Douglas plan, we brought folks in from across the country who had lived experience and said, what do you believe Black America needs in your community? Not just across the board in America, across the board, because we're not a monolith. What do you need in your community to be successful? And as we did that, and that's something that has stuck with me throughout my career. I make sure that we always bring in who is the least common denominator, who are the people, who are the folks that we're investing in, making sure that our plans are centered in the people that we want to see change for, not just our own volition. So there's a few things when we start thinking about bringing change through community organizing. Developing your strategy in the next steps of community organizing, and like what your strategy will vary greatly. Depending on what type of organizing you're doing. However, all types of organizing and members in your group want to come together and develop agreed upon answers for the following questions. So when you come together your group, you want to make sure that you have a consensus across the board for these questions here. What are your long-term and your short-term goals? What does that look like? What does it mean? What does it look like to develop to win in the next 30 days? What does it look like to win in the next 90 days? What does that look like what does our community look like in 6 months with this steady organizing and the steady advocacy? What are our you had something, Doc? What are our organizational strengths and weaknesses? What do we know that we need to strengthen up in this space? And what are asking yourself, looking at that SWOT analysis, what's our strengths, what's our weaknesses, what's our opportunities, what's our threats? What do we do well? What don't we do well? What can we win right now? And who doesn't want this to happen? That's something you always got to ask yourself. Who doesn't want me advocating in this space right now? Who's benefiting from these folks not knowing? And when you figure out who's benefiting from these folks not knowing, your world and your perspectives changes a lot differently in how you tackle these issues and these problems. And then you bring yourself to think about who cares about these issues. Generally, it's the people that you're advocating for, or it could be other organizations that benefit from your advocacy. Like for instance, we work our butts off here around the interstate licensure compact. But there's a number of social work organizations that benefit from the efforts and the work that we do for the licensure compact, because that's something that we care about. And we're always going to do our advocacy and our due diligence for the licensure compact because that benefits social workers, regardless of us getting the benefit. One of the things that you learn as a Black scholar, and hopefully over the course of time, by the time I have kids, this ain't gonna be the truth, but this is just our reality right now, especially as a innovative Black young folk in the space. 9 times out of 10, you're not gonna get the credit, but your idea is gonna live on. The thing is, it doesn't suck, yeah, but it's a testament of how important you really are to these spaces, because you'll start to see that everything you say, people may package up and they take it for themselves, but you know that you're originator of that. And I coached for a very long time. So I always told my kids when recruiters come around, I'm gonna talk you up. I'm gonna sell you like a $2 bill and they out of style. I'm gonna talk you up because I know who you are, the kind of kid you are. But I'll tell you this, when the lights come on, I can't ball for you. When you get on the court, when you get on the field, the lights come on, you got to be able to ball. If you can't ball, if you can't do it, you can't do it. That's all it comes down to. So bringing those, if you got to be able to talk the talk and walk the walk as well. And then also being able, not only who cares about the problem, but identifying your allies. I don't too much care for allies. I'm more of a co-conspirator kind of guy myself. I know, being a little pop culture, young thug, you get that RICO charge. That if you working with me, in social justice, we should get a RICO, because that means everything we do together. You can't leave me high and dry. They gonna of course. Your ally can leave you when they but it's not beneficial to them no more. Let's say, dang, my pocket's getting a little light. I'm gonna leave you behind. We look at the Black Lives Matter movement. Everybody in their grandma had a stance when it came to that of how they're going to invest in the Black community. Everyone wants their own DEI departments, and now we look 2 years down the line. Most of that funding and withered up and going away, and they ain't reinvested in that no more because people ain't talk about it no more. And then, so not looking just at who our allies are, but who are long-term co-conspirators, who the folk is going to be in this until the day they die, who's just as invested in community change as you are, and is just invested in community change as the community themselves. And then asking the question, who has the power to give you what you want? This old negotiating tactic. You go to the person who got the power. I know for a fact, if I want to get on Dr. Estreet's schedule, I'm not going to Dr. Estreet. I'm going to Danielle. She has the power to change. He be like, yeah, sure, let's meet. But once Dr. Estreet say, yeah, you better go check with Danielle, make sure that's actually the case. So it's like, who has the power to actually move something in that space? And that sometimes just like that works like that in the congressional office. Yeah, the member gives the sign off, but the person at the front desk could be the person that they trust the most. It could be their chief of staff. It could be their deputy, the person who has the power to give you what you want. So when you start your community organizing tactics and you start building your allies, you also got to remember we were doing our SWOT analysis. Who's the part of making sure you lean into your strengths? Is your weakness someone who can give you what you want, who just don't want to do it? Is it, or is that an opportunity? Is the you who can give you one is someone that you work with closely and they tap into your threats. And then lastly, how can we make our work enjoyable for the community members to be a part of? Yes, people come for the issue, but they stay for the people. When you are an organizer, when you are tapping into community work, people are going to show up because people get just as pissed off. Because if I'm gonna do something. Don't tell your parents. Don't get mad at me. But everyone point at me just like this. Everyone, I want to see everyone just point at me. I know it's kind of rude, but point at me. When you point at me, that's like just like an issue. I'm pointing at an issue. Damn, that's something bad in the community. But when you look at yourself, there's three fingers pointing right back at you, saying, "Go forth and organize." When you're able to identify an issue, when you have the know-a-thon to identify an issue, you have the ability to say, this is a problem in my community. That means I have the know-a-thon to identify and point it out. I have the ability to go and find resources to fix it. I may not have all the answers right now, but if you go through these steps here and start answering these questions for yourself and you point out that issue, now you got yourself a little organizing group, a little community organizing group that can go and actually start working towards these issues. And I always tell folks, go forth and organize. Because when you go forth and organize, you're going to be able to see the outcomes change so vividly. And when you have onus in that process, not only do you feel the encouragement and empowerment behind it, your community members, they see, like I told you, folks are looking up to you whether you know it or not. When you get those letters behind your name, when you're blessed enough to move into the percentage of folks, the slim percentage of folks who actually obtain college degrees, the slim percentage of folks who actually obtain their professional licenses, you become a trusted member in your society. So those three fingers pointing back at you, telling you to go forth and organize, use your voice, use your resources, lean into Sankofa and tap into that space of going back and taking care of your community because it's our responsibilities. It's our duty to do so. So I got I have one last video for you before we come to a close today and we open it up for questions. This is Veronica here, and this is one of her community organizing journey.
When it's time to step up and be a leader, that's what I'm always going to do. My name is Veronica Stevens. I'm 17 years old and I'm from Richmond, California. Richmond is it's a very diverse city, but it's very low budgeted. It was a very rough time when I was a kid. We were living with my nana at first. Then we moved in with my dad's mom, and then we were hopping from hotel to hotel. Sometimes we even slept in the car. And then my dad, he got arrested and sent to jail. So it was me, my mom, and my brother by ourselves. I know a lot of people are going through the same thing as me, even and probably even worse. That really motivated me to start, doing what I do now. My counselor, she told me about this center for youth. She told me it's about working with people that goes through the same struggle as me. Right when I walked in, there was so many kids there, and I was like, okay, well, I feel comfortable. This is a place you can come and chill. Rise is just like a place where you can go to get help with homework, or if you wanted to make a resume, or if you needed somebody to talk to. We do a lot for our community. We go to like state boards and city representatives, and we do campaigns, and we try to like outreach to other youth. I work on community safety, health issues, youth services. We're trying to get more youth centers around Richmond so we could have more resources for low income children like me and my brothers and my sisters. When I graduate after high school, I want to go to San Francisco State. I want to explore more, but I'll always know that Richmond is where I came from. That's where I sprouted from. My little sister, she's 6, and my little brother, he's 14. They look up to me. So if I had the opportunity to change my community when they grow up, hopefully they'll follow in my footsteps and do the same thing as me. There's a lot of powerful people that came from doing something while they're younger. So I just want to be one of those people that helps my community, not just leave it how it is.
So I always show that video as a little ode to Veronica, and with that, what you can do in your community, is taking those small steps, taking that step. Like I said, when you're pointing at a problem in your community, and I'm sure you got the things that you care about. There's a reason that if you're in the behavioral health space, and you're in this space, there's something that called you to this space. It's something that in social workers we call ourselves the helping profession. You know, and as we start to lean into the helping profession, it's something that brought you here to say, I'm duty bound to help. And I highlight that her story because she was duty bound to help, and she saw folks in her community, and she said, I have the know-it-all. You have the know-it-all, you have the tools, you have the skills, and what you don't have, you can build, and what you can't build, you can take. And what you can't take, you can buy. So, and we're here as a resource for you here in NSW. So as we start moving into those next steps of what you can do to help your community to be a better community organizer, to be a better behavior health specialist in this space, is one, become a member of NSW. Come and join with us. We have all folks across the board, whether you are a social worker or not, we can advocate together. Two, make a plan to vote and make sure that you get folks across the board to vote with you as well. And then look for any form of follow-up communications of how you can get involved, what that looks like across the board, how you can, with these last 3 days before the election, how you can get involved, how you can make sure that you're tampering your own anxiety by doing the things that you need to do. I know later today I'm going to be going to Philly to go do some door knocking, and then on Sunday I'm going to be in Maryland making sure that we get Angela Osserbrooks elected. So doing the things that in your comfort level to get there. There's a quote from a guy from Atlanta that you may know who says, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. As long as you just keep moving, and just keep moving towards a space of justice and community building. And then lastly, pick your first step of action. It could be small, it could be big, it could be small. Just bring someone along with you. Whether you get organized one person or you organize 100. Pick your first step and make sure that you're committed yourself to doing action. Don't just be a talker, be a doer. Leaders lead for a reason. And then last thing I'll lead you with some little bit of joy here, but go forth and organize and tap into that space. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Dr. Street and myself are here. I'm going to stop sharing screen, and we're going to open it up for questions, anything you folks have for us. But if not, we'll give you back your Saturday, and I appreciate you folks for being here with us.
Thank you so much. You two did a very good duo together. That was really nice and so timely and so appropriate. Students, should I say scholars, do we have any questions or comments you'd like to make? Because these are the experts. You won't do any good to ask me, Ms. Campbell or Dr. Jones. This is the time for you to get your questions asked. I know some of the students in the counseling education program, you're working on your capstone papers. So so that's why I was dropping some things in the chat, because you might be able to find a way to use that information. But this would be a great opportunity for all of you as well to ask any questions that might be helpful to you in multiple ways.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would want to leave everybody here with is that, you know, election anxiety is real, right? We've been taking on and really taking in a whole lot of information from what one candidate does, what another candidate does, what one isn't doing, what that isn't doing, who should exist, who should not exist. And the reality of the situation is, you know, we have to, one, give ourselves grace. We are not the superheroes that people try to say we are. You know, everybody's like, oh, social work superhero. I'm not a superhero. I don't wear a cape. But at the same time, what I am going to do is make sure that I do my part to advocate, because, you know, this belief that somehow it's supposed to be on one person to change the community, we have to get away from that, right? Our collective voice and our collective effort is really where all the power comes from. So the more that we lean on each other, right? So as I was looking and trying to respond to as many questions that I could in the chat, I can't help but think that, you know, in this group alone, like, you are each other's community. This is how you are able to continue to do the work and to continue to lean on each other. Be like, look, today just ain't the day. I ain't got time to be dealing with all this nonsense about women shouldn't lead and all that, right? But then tomorrow, once you had your time to break, once you had your time to have a break, you get back out there and you start advocating again, right? Because make no mistake about it, and Jabri said this full on, we're advocating for one thing and they're also advocating, and they have a strategy. And one of the things that I've always said, and this has kind of been, this is also a criticism on how we deal with politics when it comes to the two-party system. One thing that I'll tell you is that Democrats are definitely going to be in a space where we are trying to ensure that everyone has a voice. At the same time, if you look at the Republican candidates, and it was clear as day, they play to win. When they asked flat out before the candidates were down to just one, how many of you all would vote for Trump if he got the nomination? Every single one of them raised their hand except for Chris Christie, right? And so we get into this space where sometimes we get torn on one issue or one thing that we're not 100% solid on, instead of thinking about what kind of good we can do in the long run. And so as we get into these spaces of political anxiety, electoral anxiety, like, give yourself grace, give yourself time to really understand the issues, but also understand that it's also okay to not try to convince every single person, because there are people out there that are just not going to think like you, that are just not going to believe what you believe. And really, I'd rather us spend our time on those individuals that are open to have conversations and really that are open to possibly consider an alternative point of view.
Amen. So I thank you for some of the gracious comments you're making in the chat, as this is recorded and archived, so we appreciate that. So I don't have any more final words. I'm going to ask Ms. Campbell. Thank you all so very much again for being with us, Dr. Estreet, and I say Dr., but Mr. Harris. Thank you so very much. And we truly look forward to that PowerPoint presentation to put in our archive and send out to the students as well. Actually,
we're going to go ahead and claim it. Jabri going to be Dr. Harris at some point in time. He just don't know it yet.
Yeah, he just doesn't know it yet. We've already laid the groundwork for you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But consider CAU if possible, but we'll support you wherever you are. Thank you so very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you all for hanging in there for almost 2 long hours. I know that can be a tremendous undertaking. Let me just give you a few little tips about Zoom etiquette. Now, my students already know what I'm getting ready to say. If your presenter is live, you should be live. If they're not live, then you don't have to be. But I do understand it's nearly impossible to stay live for 2 hours. It's just, so we get that. So step away, come back, step away again, and come back. That's the professional thing to do. Third thing I want to say is, when you're moving around, it's distracting. Like if you're walking or you're trying to drive, I've seen people flossing their teeth. I've seen somebody look like they're knitting, playing with your baby. And I love children. Trust me, I do. Can't wait to be a grandmama. I'm going to take Dr. Miss Campbell's son and adopt him. But try to make sure it's not in the camera, because all that fidgety movement is distracting to us that are trying to stay in tune, because we want to see what you're doing, because it does look exciting, I must admit. But just keep those little things in mind, and be sensitive about, what you're wearing, that we can see. If you don't want to dress up, that's fine. But then just like I got on some clothes, just so you know, but I do have it where it's right there for you. So if I'm not dressed so cool, you can't really tell. But just keep those kind of things in mind, because especially for you all that's going to be doing telemental health counseling or social work, you're going to want people to do the same for you when you're working with them via the internet, for example. So let's give what we want to receive. And so that was my other thing I want to say. And I think the fourth or fifth thing I want to say is that I attempted to review your reflections last night. I like to do them either Thursday or Friday before our next session. And at that time, there were 18 of you that had not completed that task. Late last night, I went back and I got a little ding, ding. Let me know 2 of y'all just sent yours in, because it does chime every time someone does that. So maybe now 16 of you have not done yours. So it'll be a few days before I can get back to reading those, but let's get those in. And then there were 4 of you that either didn't submit the time before this time, or you submitted an inappropriate reflection and you need to redo that. So I want to go back. I'm going to give you some time to get all that together. I'm going to go back and check on those 4 people. Then I'm going to come back and do the reflection on the 18 that were not in there last night when I did it, but I know 2 of you just did, but I haven't read it yet. So, and I also want to say to those that are doing this reflection work, thank you so much. I know you got 1,000 things on your plate, but you seem like, unless you're fooling me, and as far as I can tell, it doesn't look like AI. I'm not checking against AI. I'm not sending it through Turnitin. It seems like you're really vested in this grant that you have. You're not just taking it because you got some money to go pay your car note. You're really vested in this. And I may be wrong because I'm not God, so I don't know everything. But I do want to thank you. And some of you all, I actually make a little comment about this is so good. I know you poured your soul and heart out into this reflection. You didn't have to say all that, but you did. So just know that this is very meaningful. And you all are the last year of the grant. So we are going to rewrite for the grant. We will pull these reflexive statements and comments that you are submitting to us as part of our documentation as to how they need to the federal government needs to refund this program for another 4 years. So I don't want you to think that the work you're doing is just some busy work. It is data collection for our department, and you're passing the baton on to the next group of students that hopefully we can get funding for another 4 years. So your work is trailblazing and it's historical. So please don't get the feeling, oh, they just want to know. This is big time what you're doing here. The pictures that we take, we archive them as well. They also will be put into our portfolio as we resubmit for this grant again, which we plan to work on in January. So just know that the work you do is not in vain, and thank you so, so very much.
I just want to add that, this is a job. You are being paid for this. So if you're not completing the requirements of the job, then we can't just pay you, because we're paying, your stipend is to then help us be able to get refunded for another 4 years. And if you're not doing your part, then we can't do our part. So please make sure you get those in and try to get them in on time. I understand you guys are students, you have a lot going on. We don't try to make it hard on you. Just get those in, please. And if you have not done your surveys, please do those surveys and just mark on there in Canvas that you have completed the surveys. So there'll be one more reflection this semester for this session, along with another survey. So I want you guys to try to get that completed, and we'll have our holiday event next month. So yeah, just try to get that stuff in. We don't want to be, sticklers and, dock anyone's pay or anything, but you do need to do your part.
Dr. Jones, you have any final comments? I think Dr. Jones is multitasking today as well. Okay, everybody, have a great weekend. If you haven't voted like me, I haven't voted. I plan on stepping up and down on a Tuesday morning with all my non-Black people in my neighborhood. I'm going to have my pink Kamala Harris t-shirt on. I'm going to have it covered up because I know I can't show that while I'm voting. But as soon as I turn around from voting, I'm going to open up my jacket and I'm going to prance on out of there with my AKA jacket on. And I'm hoping and praying for victory and success. But however this goes, I need you to know you're going to be okay. I'm the oldest one on this screen, and I've been through many votes. At the end of the day, we're going to be okay. We may not be better than we are now, but we are still going to be okay. And the worst scenario that if Donald Trump gets in there, he can only do 4 years. So if we can survive him last 4 years, we can survive him again. But I'm just praying that we won't have that. And I guess let me just say this, and this has nothing to do with nothing, but you young people, Our legacy is on your shoulder. All right, so we need you to carry the bloodstained banner. Please don't let our race have to go back 400 years because you don't want to vote, you don't want to march, you don't want to get committed, you don't want to be an advocate. You're saying with this profession that you're chosen that you do, but don't let other people persuade you to do otherwise. You know, when I was your age, if it was a march in the metro area, I was there. I've gone to Washington to march. I've gone to Costa Rica to be a part of advocacy. Do your part, because so many, we're standing on the shoulders of people that have died and been buried. Men were castrated, women were raped. You know the story. But if you're not careful, it will happen all over again. There are some people that are still interested in putting us back on the psychological plantation. No, we won't be picking cotton. We won't be getting anything but handouts. So, but it's your turn now. You know, I can only march so much these days, but but it's your turn, and you are wiser than we were at the time. You got more technology, connection, more influence, and I promise you, you got way more education than our ancestors had. And if they could stand up to these bullies, you can do it too. So we can have some more agency. Black Lives Matter is the only thing that can happen. And some of you are right here, you're powerful to form a unit that you can come up with something original and different that the whole world will have to stand back and take a look at. We got all the talent we need in the room right now. We don't even need to go get anybody else. It's right here. Your intercollaboration can be today, right now, in this space with some of your colleagues right here. No one is smarter than you, and no one is as cute and as handsome as you either, because all our Black people are just awesome from the inside to the outside. Now, I'm not going to preach anymore because I am a preacher's daughter, so let me stop. Have a blessed day, and just know we all love y'all and think and pray for y'all all the time. And just take care of yourself and be safe and help somebody. Take care.